Do you remember the old saying, you'll be known by the company you keep? Well, in the ninth beatitude, Jesus says that part of the blessing that results from being persecuted is that it puts you in good company. Now, if you recall, last Sunday we studied the eighth beatitude and discovered that it says that we will be persecuted for what we stand for. That's being righteousness. Remember in chapter 5, verse 10 of Matthew, Jesus said, "Blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness." Now this Sunday, we're studying the ninth beatitude, and it tells us that we will be persecuted for who we stand with, and that's Jesus. Again, in Matthew 5, verse 11 and 12, it says, "Blessed are you when people insult you, persecute you, and falsely say all kinds of evil against you because of me." The Message translation puts it this way: "Not only that, count yourselves blessed every time people put you down or throw you out or speak lies about you to discredit me." What it means is that the truth is too close for comfort, and they are very uncomfortable. You see, throughout history, those who have stood with God have been persecuted. Well, why is that? Because the world goes against the grain, against the character and the nature of God. And when you take a stand with God, the world takes notice and doesn't like it. And the result can be persecution. But I want you to notice something. Jesus doesn't stop there. He goes on and he says this in verse 12. "Rejoice and be glad." In the face of persecution? Yes. Rejoice and be glad. Here's why. "Because great is your reward in heaven." And there's a question is this: why are the prophets good company? Jesus said your reward in heaven is great and because you're like the prophets. The answer is easy. The prophets stood with God no matter what. They didn't stop when the going got tough. They were determined to live a righteous life, to live for God, no matter how they were received or how they were treated. It may be a good idea this week, before your group time, if you have time, to actually look at some of those prophets who were persecuted. Now, I've included some material on the website that will help you do that. You might take time then in your group to discuss why these different people were persecuted, what happened to them, in other words, how were they persecuted, and how they managed to stay faithful. You're going to notice that I make a reference to Hebrews chapter 11. It's in Hebrews chapter 11 that we find what I call God's great hall of the faithful. Men and women who lived and died for God. And after chapter 11, chapter 12, verses 1 through 3, the author writes this: "Therefore, since we are surrounded by such a huge crowd of witnesses," that's all those people, that great hall of faith in chapter 11, "since we are surrounded by such a huge crowd of witnesses to the life of faith, let us strip off every weight that slows us down, especially the sin that so easily trips us up. And let us run with endurance the race that God has set before us. We do this by keeping our eyes on Jesus, the champion." Some translations say the author of our faith. "The champion who initiates and perfects our faith. Because of the joy awaiting him, he endured the cross, disregarding its shame. Now he is seated in the place of honor beside God's throne. Think of all the hostility he endured from sinful people. Then you won't become weary and give up." The author is telling us there that the prophets and others who suffered persecution because they stood with God, they serve us as a wonderful example. But ultimately, the best example is Jesus himself. I placed a link to the website, Voices of the Martyrs, on our website. You can get it there. And there you're going to find a prayer map for Christians around the world who are being persecuted. I would encourage you to look at that map in your group and discuss how maybe your group can be praying for different peoples around the world who are being persecuted. There's also a good video on that link that you can see that deals with persecution. I put another couple of links on the website under the heading Additional Material. One of those is a link to a website by Nick Ripken. Nick was a Southern Baptist missionary who has written an amazing book called The Insanity of God. It deals with persecution of Christians around the world. I highly recommend it. You can get it in our bookstore. There's also a link for a video that was done with Nick that deals with the topic of persecution. Again, it might be something you could use in your missional community if you have time. Finally, I put a link to a site for Evangelist Johnson of Africa. I'm just going to tell you folks, he has a powerful testimony of how persecution increased his faith. I hope that your study this week will help some people to recognize that if they're going to be serious in their relationship with Jesus Christ, there is a good chance that there will be some people who will oppose them and perhaps even oppress them. That's important. But I want you to spend some time not just talking about the negative aspect of persecution, but about the positive aspect, the blessings that God promises as well. I just tell you, it's going to be a great Sunday, and I hope that your hearts are prepared for it. God bless.